Hi, teachers. This is EOT in Brazil, and I'm Walter. Here today to talk to you yet again about the Delta. So this is one more of the videos in the series, as you saw. We had a bunch of videos talking about Delta Module 1. We talked about all the tasks that you had in Module 1, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about Delta Module 3. It's just going to be me in this one, and I want to share with you my findings, my understanding of the whole thing on Delta Module 3. Mind you, we are not Delta tutors. This is not a Delta prep course. This is just a video for people who are thinking and considering about, they're considering taking Delta, and maybe they already took Delta Module 1. You're thinking about which one you're going to go next. So we shall address those questions too, right? Before we start, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Just click right down below, dá essa moralzinha pra gente, and I'll see you in a minute. Roda a vinheta. All right, so we're back. I think that the first thing to do here is to answer what Delta Module 3 is. So Delta Module 1 was a test, right? And a long one. Delta Module 3 is an assignment, a written assignment you're going to write, and it's a course proposal. You have to devise an entire course. So the first thing is it's so completely different from Module 1, because in Module 1, you're studying for a test, and in Delta Module 3, you feel like things are more under your control because it's you doing everything. However, it's very different. I took courses for both modules, and I think the experience is the beginning of Delta Module 3 for me, I was just lost, because in Delta Module 1, I had units and I had books, so I will have to do reading and do exercises and just do exercises like weekly. But for Delta Module 3, you don't get that. You read and you write. So the beginning was different. I wouldn't say it's difficult. It's just different, very different experience from Delta Module 1. And well, let's dive into it, right? Why not? Let's just go for it. Let's take a look, right? So it's a written assignment, it's a course proposal, we have to devise it. First thing you have to keep in mind, you choose your own specialism. My specialism, language development for teachers, which means I'm devising a course, a general English course, but for teachers. If it helps you understand, you think it that way. But you might choose among, like, there are, I don't know, 12 options, like exam teaching, you're teaching exam classes, EAP, ESP, like English for academic purposes, whatever you choose. There are many different ones. You choose one of those, and then you will have to do that. You write about that specialism, you devise a course for a group taking a course in that area. So mine was that. Well, let's take a look. It has four, well, we could say 5 parts if you count on the conclusion anyway. So 5 parts. As you can see my screen in there, right? I've taken some notes because I want to keep this video a little shorter, as short as possible, really. So part 1 is your introduction. So your choice of specialism, you write about that. Reasons for choosing it, you write about that, and characteristics about it. Now, you should choose between 4 to 6, if I'm not mistaken, options, topics that are which are characteristics of that specific specialism that you chose. For example, I talked about imposter's syndrome. I talked about writing skills, because teachers sometimes it's something, and by the way, that's not my opinion. That's all based on research and things that you read. I would say, like, for my specialism, reading a book by Magis, that's his name, called The Non-Native Teacher. That was really very useful, but there were many articles and other books that were very useful as well. But again, it has to relate to your specialism. You choose your characteristics, the topics. For example, in my case was imposter syndrome, writing skills, language awareness and language competence. Those are kind of related, even though language awareness is more important. You write about it. That's part one. You're going to take some time doing it. And then your tutor is going to give you feedback. That's how it went for me. And then you move on to part two. I want to keep this short, so let's make it very objective. Part two is called needs analysis. It's what it is. When you think about needs analysis, you have to think about your needs analysis tools. In my case, a questionnaire and an interview. So I had a group of teachers. They worked at the same school where I worked, and they were volunteers. So I never actually taught the course. You don't have to, but you can. But they were okay. So I did the whole needs analysis as though we were going to have that course. It was actually very interesting. I got to learn a lot more about them. But anyway, so I had the interview, I had the needs analysis, and again, my specialism, it needs to be clear that I'm not going to teach these teachers how to teach English. It's not about that. It's a language course, right? So I had to make sure that I'm actually doing a language needs analysis based on the needs they have in terms of language. So I had the questionnaire, and then I had that interview, and they were all very productive, especially the interview. Moving on, you do a diagnostic test, not one, maybe many. In my case, I actually used one of the tools used in the needs analysis, which was the interview, as a diagnostic test for language, because I was analyzing errors, analyzing language, their production really, and that was part of my diagnostic testing. But I also tested their listening, their writing skills. There was a use of language, grammar, vocabulary, areas of language in general. From the diagnostic testing, we come to the results. And from those results, we reach this. We go to course priorities. There were 5, and usually 5 or 6, not more than 6, I think. And that's why it's so important, because these course priorities will inform your course proposal. Is starting with your COs, your course objectives, which are basically your course priorities. But you're gonna word that differently, but you know where it's coming from, right? So in the course proposal, mind you, in here you have to devise a course. You have to write this whole thing, but you are also going to write like a syllabus, right? You're not going to write lesson plannings, and it's not as difficult as it seems. It's just that you have to read, and then you have to research and look for materials. Are you going to devise, or are you going to use things from course books that it has to make sense to the students. So the needs analysis is just so important, right? So you choose your syllabus, and this part is so interesting. I gotta say, writing about syllabus was my favorite thing, as well as assessment, because the thing is, I didn't know anything about syllabuses from module 1. Not really. I knew a lot about assessment, but in terms of like writing about syllabuses, I didn't know much. And then you read so much, and I remembered specifically this book called Course Designed by David Nunn, 1988. I even remember the date. And I also remember there's this guy on the internet. His name is Alex Walsh. I love his videos, and I watch. He does book reviews. Great idea. We should do it. Anyway, and he didn't like that book, and then when I got to read it, and that's one of those books that I actually got from cover to cover, and I was like, wow, but I love this book. I think it's one of those that I was like, wow, this is one of my favorites in the whole Delta experience. And you're right about the syllabus. Is it going to be a synthetic syllabus, analytical analytic syllabus? There are many types of those, as well as course objectives. You have process you have product objectives, all of those. And by the way, all of those are in Nanan's book. And then you have to talk about approaches. Yeah, methodology goes in there. And then you have to talk about materials. Yes. And then you have to talk about constraints, like the negativity, the negative things that could happen in that course. You have to predict those as well. It's all about predicting problems. And that's part 3. And so we breathe, because now we move on into part 4. It's assessment and evaluation, and which is interesting because Bruno and I just did a course on assessment. So guess what? It's about formative and summative. And then when you talk about the tools, the assessment tools you're going to have, then formative and summative, you have to write about those. But guess what? You might talk about backwash. You will talk about formal and informal assessment. It is there. Remember when I said in the other course that usually when you have informal assessment, they are part of formative, and when you have more formal, they will be summative, but formal can also be informative. It's all in there. So it's a lot of reading. Afterwards, you do a course evaluation. It's all actually things that students will do, which means all of that, you actually make these tests, not the whole thing, only what needs to be appended according to what your tutor says this needs to be there. So again, if you're not taking a prep for it, well, I would, or at least you got to have somebody to be, somebody who's got your back there. I'll be safe. I'll have somebody, who's got my back there anyway. And then you move on to part 5. That's your conclusion. And well, yeah, that's what it is. Now I'm going to show you mine, right? So there are two files, right? There's file 1, file 2. File 1 is the whole thing plus the appendices 1 and 2, but then file 2 is just appendices. In the first file, you only have collated results. I mean, everything is summarized. As for the second file, you get the whole appendices. You have samples, you have the tests, you have everything in there. So I'll show you a little bit, but then again, if the specialism you want is this, I would even recommend that you don't even look at it. So just so you play safe, because you don't want to plagiarize anything. It's a dangerous move anyway. By the way, you have many samples out there on the internet. I would recommend that you do not look at the ones that those of the same area, the same specialism that you choose, because you want to be safe with these things. That would be a nightmare anyway. So this, let me see. Yeah, this is document 1, as big as I can anyway. So here you have the area of content. I know it's a big document. It can be scary. It has 38 pages. It is long. It's hard work, not gonna lie to you. So this is part 1. In all the areas that I talked about. Yeah. It went down. It's so long. Hold on. Yeah. And then we have part 2, needs analysis, and then you have everything. The questionnaire I told you about, the interviews. And then you're going to have the results of the diagnostic testing, which will inform your course priorities, as we talked about, which will become your course objectives, as you can see here. And then you have the syllabus, the approach and activities, course organization and sequencing. I didn't even mention that one. Materials and constraints. And then you have assessment, and then when we get to the conclusion, part 5, and then we move on. Finally, we get to this is the appendices of document number 1, and then here this is just I'm just going to show you the beginning of it. Like it's not that it's too long, but my course was split into units, so there are 3 units and there are 10 lessons. Believe then, that should give you some idea of what the whole thing looks like. there are 38 pages in document number 1, and there are 40, I believe 42 in document number 2 with the appendices. We're looking at about 4 to 6 months work, and yeah, it's long. There's just a lot for you to do, but it is a rewarding experience, and I want to give you that. I think you just learn so much while you're doing it. And if you're considering it, remember, probably module one is, it's important that you do it first. Well, this is it for this video, and I'll see you soon. We will be starting a new series of videos on, we'll be talking about course materials, course books, and we're going to be reacting to those anyway. And once again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do it, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Goodbye.